I never meant to fall for her, my best friend's mother. But sometimes, the heart doesn't ask for permission, it just recognizes something it's been missing. I'd been to my friend's house 100 times before. It was the kind of place that always smelled like coffee and fresh laundry, ordinary, comfortable. But that day felt different. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was me. When she opened the door, I remember how the afternoon sun caught the edges of her hair, turning them almost gold. She smiled, not the kind of smile people force when they're being polite, but something softer, unguarded. "Hey, you're early," she said, brushing her palms on her jeans. I don't know why, but the way she said it, casual, easy, made me feel like I'd stepped into a moment that wasn't mine to interrupt. She led me into the kitchen while she finished arranging flowers in a vase. I watched the way her hands moved, calm, sure, graceful in a way that comes from years of knowing who you are. Her voice filled the space like warm light, asking about school, work, life. I answered, though my attention kept slipping to the tiny details, the faint scent of jasmine from her tea, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft clink of glass when she set the vase down. I'd always thought of her as my friend's mom, kind, composed, someone's parent. But that day, for the first time, I noticed the woman beneath the title. The gentle tiredness in her eyes, the confidence in her posture, the way she seemed to carry both strength and loneliness without complaint. At one point, she laughed, really laughed, at something I said. She touched my arm lightly as she did, and I felt the warmth of her skin through the sleeve of my shirt. It was nothing. A simple gesture. But it stayed with me, sharp and quiet, long after. When my friend finally came downstairs, she stepped back, her voice bright again, the distance between us restored as if nothing had shifted. But something had. As I left later, she stood at the door, the sunlight outlining her silhouette. "Take care, all right," she said. I nodded, but couldn't find words that felt right. Walking away, I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just an ordinary afternoon. Yet her smile kept replaying in my mind, steady and kind, like a song that refuses to fade. And that was the first time I realized something dangerous, that sometimes, noticing someone can be the beginning of everything you can't undo. It started innocently, it always does. At first, our talks were just pauses between moments. When my friend wasn't around, she'd ask if I wanted tea, and I'd stay a little while longer. The conversation would drift, about work, movies, the small frustrations that fill a day. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. But the hours began to slip away more easily than they should have. Sometimes I'd look up and realize the light outside had changed, afternoon gold fading into evening. She had that kind of presence that made time gentle, unhurried. One day, she asked about my plans for the future. Her tone was curious but kind, the way someone asks because they actually want to know. I told her I wasn't sure, that everyone around me seemed to have a map, and I was still wandering without one. She smiled faintly, stirring her tea. "You don't have to know yet," she said. "People pretend they do, but life has a way of surprising you." There was something in her voice, not advice, not authority, just quiet understanding. I wanted to keep her talking, not for the words themselves, but for the way she made me feel seen. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table. The window was open, letting in a soft breeze that played with the loose strands of her hair. I remember how she tucked them behind her ear, and how my eyes followed the motion before I realized I was staring. She caught me once, not in a teasing way, but with a look that held stillness. A pause too long to be casual. Then she smiled, just enough to let me breathe again. The more we spoke, the more the space between us thinned. She told me about her younger days, the things she dreamed of doing, the paths she never took. I listened, realizing how much of her life had been spent giving, guiding, being strong for others. And maybe that's why I stayed. Because when she spoke to me, I saw the part of her that no one else seemed to notice, the softness she'd learned to hide. When I finally stood to leave, the house had grown quiet. She walked me to the door, her hand brushing mine as she reached for the handle. "Drive safe," she said, her eyes lingering for just a heartbeat longer than they needed to. And in that heartbeat, I knew, we were both beginning to feel something we weren't supposed to. The sky broke open on a Thursday afternoon. I'd only meant to stop by for a minute, to return a book she'd lent me. But before I could even knock, the rain came down hard, a sudden curtain of sound. She opened the door with that same calm grace, her expression softening when she saw me standing there, half drenched. "Come in, quickly," she said, reaching out instinctively, her hand brushing my sleeve as she pulled me inside. The warmth of her home hit me all at once, the faint smell of coffee and cinnamon, the low hum of a radio in another room. She handed me a towel, smiling faintly. "You'll catch a cold." Her voice carried that gentle authority that made me listen without question. I dried my hair awkwardly while she busied herself in the kitchen. The rain hammered against the windows, steady and relentless. When she returned, she was holding 2 mugs of tea. "Looks like you're stuck here for a while," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. Her tone was light, but something in her eyes told me she felt it too, that quiet awareness neither of us could name. For a while, we just listened to the rain. The world outside felt washed away, only the sound of water and the soft ticking of the clock remained. She pulled a blanket around her shoulders, then hesitated before offering part of it to me. I accepted, our arms brushing as we adjusted it between us. It wasn't a bold touch, just a quiet nearness, but it changed the air. I could feel her warmth through the fabric, the subtle rhythm of her breathing. Every small movement, the way she tucked her legs beneath her, the way she turned her head to listen, felt magnified, intimate. She started talking again, softly. About the storm, about how rain made her feel calm and restless all at once. I told her I understood, that sometimes quiet moments reveal the things we've been avoiding. For a long while, we said nothing. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was something heavier, fuller. She turned to look at me, her eyes reflecting the muted light from the window, full of something unspoken. Neither of us moved. The rain kept falling, patient and endless, as if giving us permission to stay suspended in that fragile space, somewhere between what we were, and what we almost became. After that afternoon, something unspoken lingered between us. We didn't talk about it, we couldn't. But from then on, even the simplest moments seemed charged with a kind of quiet awareness neither of us wanted to admit. When I stopped by the next week, she greeted me politely, almost formally. The warmth that had once felt so natural between us had cooled into something measured. Her smile was brief, her tone careful. She didn't offer tea this time, just a seat by the counter while she finished sorting through papers. I told myself I was imagining it, the distance, the restraint. But then I noticed the small tremor in her hand when she passed me a cup of water, the way she avoided meeting my eyes for too long. She spoke about practical things, errands, plans for the weekend, her son's schedule. But her voice had a slight tension underneath, like a held breath. I tried to keep the conversation easy, but every word felt like stepping closer to something fragile. At one point, I reached for a pen that had rolled off the counter, and our hands brushed. It was a fleeting touch, barely a second, yet her fingers froze against mine before she pulled away. The air seemed to tighten between us. She finally turned toward me then, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't spend so much time here," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't sharp, but there was a sadness in it that cut deeper than any anger could have. "I know," I said. And I meant it. But I also knew that if she asked me to stay, I would. She sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose, like someone exhausted from holding too many thoughts at once. "People might misunderstand," she added. Then, softer, "we might misunderstand." Her words hung in the space between us, fragile, trembling. I nodded, though inside, a part of me was already mourning something we hadn't even had. When I left, the sky outside was dim with late afternoon light. I glanced back once before getting into my car. She was standing by the window, her silhouette framed by the glow of the kitchen behind her. For a moment, she looked like she might open the door, like she might say something that would undo the distance she'd just built. But she didn't. And that's when I realized, sometimes love isn't about crossing lines, it's about learning how to live on the edge of them. It had been weeks since I'd last seen her. We both seemed to need the distance, or at least, we told ourselves we did. But that night, fate or chance, or something between, brought us face to face again. I'd gone to drop something off for her son. The house was quiet when I knocked, the hour late enough for hesitation. She opened the door slowly, surprise flickering in her eyes, then softening into something she didn't try to hide. The air outside carried the scent of rain-soaked earth, the streetlights blurred in the mist. Inside, the warmth of her home wrapped around me like memory. "You can leave it on the table," she said, her voice calm but unsteady. I nodded, setting the package down, but neither of us moved to end the moment. There was a stillness between us, not awkward, just heavy with everything we'd avoided saying. She looked tired. Not from age, but from restraint. Her eyes found mine, then dropped, as if she couldn't decide whether to hold on or look away. "I thought avoiding you would make it easier," she whispered finally. "But it hasn't." Something inside me tightened, relief and ache tangled together. "It hasn't for me either." She smiled faintly, but it broke almost immediately. "I shouldn't want this," she said, her voice trembling on the words, "but I do." The honesty in her tone silenced the world around us. No thunder, no ticking clock, just the sound of her breath and mine, overlapping in that fragile distance. I took a step closer, slowly, so she could stop me if she wanted to. She didn't. When I reached her, I didn't touch her right away. I just stood there, close enough to feel her warmth, close enough to see the shimmer in her eyes. Then, gently, I took her hand. Her fingers hesitated before tightening around mine, small, deliberate, trembling. Her skin was soft, cool against my palm, and in that quiet contact, everything we hadn't said was suddenly understood. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to memorize the feeling before it disappeared. When she opened them again, I saw both peace and heartbreak reflected there. She gave a small, sad smile, the kind that comes when love and fear meet in the same breath. Neither of us said another word. We didn't need to. Because in that moment, beneath the hum of the night and the weight of everything unspoken, we both knew, wanting wasn't the sin. The sin was pretending we didn't. The next morning, the world looked painfully ordinary. Sunlight filtered through my window as if nothing had happened, as if the night before hadn't shifted the ground beneath us. But something had changed, quietly and completely. I didn't go to her house for a while after that. We both needed the silence. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the fragile understanding that if we saw each other again too soon, the space between right and wrong might dissolve completely. Weeks passed before I saw her again. It was at a neighborhood gathering, laughter, chatter, music filling the air. She was there, smiling politely, dressed in soft colors that made her seem almost untouchable. When our eyes met across the room, it was like time paused. She looked away first, her composure flawless. But her hands, I noticed them, twisting gently around the stem of her glass. That was the only sign. Later that evening, when the crowd thinned, she found me outside on the porch. The night air was cool, the sky washed in silver moonlight. She stood beside me, close but not too close, her arms folded as if she needed to hold herself together. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, though her eyes shimmered with the weight of unspoken things. "What happened that night, it can't happen again." I didn't argue. I just nodded. But the truth was, part of me didn't want to let go. She took a deep breath. "You've got so much ahead of you," she whispered. "And I have, a life that's already half-written. If we keep standing here like this, we'll ruin something good, even if we never meant to." Her honesty hurt more than any rejection could. Because she wasn't pushing me away out of pride, she was protecting something fragile, something we both knew couldn't survive outside that brief, impossible moment. I told her I understood. And I did. Still, when she stepped forward to hug me goodbye, every bit of composure I had threatened to break. Her arms slipped around my shoulders, her cheek resting lightly against my chest. I felt the steadiness of her heartbeat, and for a second, the world shrank to that one small rhythm, soft, human, heartbreakingly real. When she finally pulled back, her smile was gentle. "Take care of yourself," she said. That was the last time we spoke of it. But some silences don't fade. They settle, deep, quiet, and permanent, like a memory that keeps breathing long after you stop reaching for it. Years have a strange way of softening things. What once felt like fire becomes a kind of quiet light, not gone, just gentler. Life moved forward, as it always does. I grew older, found work in another city, met new people, learned how to build a life that looked steady from the outside. But sometimes, when the world slowed down, I'd find myself thinking of her. Not with longing, not with regret, just with a warmth I couldn't quite name. It was a late autumn afternoon when I saw her again. I was back in town for a short visit, walking through the park near her neighborhood. The air was crisp, the trees shedding their last gold leaves. And there she was, sitting alone on a bench, a book in her hands, her hair shorter now, touched with silver that glowed in the fading light. For a moment, I stood still, unsure if I should approach. But when she looked up and saw me, her smile made the years between us disappear. "Hey, stranger," she said softly. The sound of her voice, older, but still familiar, hit something deep inside me. We talked for a while, catching up on ordinary things, her son, my work, the quiet satisfaction of time passing without too much noise. But underneath every word, there was that same understanding, a shared history neither of us needed to explain. There were moments of silence too, but they didn't feel heavy anymore. Just calm. The kind of silence that only exists between people who once cared deeply and have learned to carry it gracefully. She laughed at one point, that same easy laugh I'd never forgotten. "You turned out well," she said, teasing gently. "I always knew you would." I smiled. "You were part of that," I said. And I meant it. The sun was setting when we finally stood to leave. The light painted everything in gold and amber, the air cool and clean. She touched my hand as we said goodbye, a small, steady touch that said more than words could. "Take care of yourself," she whispered, the same words she'd said years ago, but softer this time, without the ache. I watched her walk away, the leaves swirling at her feet. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just felt right. Some stories don't need to end in forever. Some are meant to stay as they are, brief, beautiful, and enough. If you felt this story, if it lingered somewhere in your chest the way certain memories do, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more slow burn stories like this, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever loved someone you weren't meant to? I'd love to hear your story.